Hello friends, enemies, and all the rest. For those who don't know, giallo is an Italian genre of horror spanning from the 60s up to the 80s, the preceders of the slasher genre boom to come. The most famous names belonging to it being Dario Argento, Lucio Fulci, Mario Bava. Now with the giallo, we're looking for incredibly artificial sets and murder set pieces, candy-colored lights and paint, an abundance of fashion and models. They're like movies clearly made by photographers, giving an artsy sheen to what would normally be your exploitation B-movies. Also way better than they should be are the scores, the funkiest, synthiest jams to ever grace the period. And if you're really lucky, get some Ennio Morricone in there or some Goblin. Speaking of sound, just get used to dubs.
Ha lasciato ogni suo avere all'Istituto di Studi e Ricerche per le Malattie Mentali. Cosa?
The Italians, they cast actors speaking completely different languages and focus on the face, maybe the voice, or with women, the body. They get past this by collectively not giving a shit about how noticeable the dub is, so it's really just up to you whether you can learn to not care either. For me, it oddly isn't such an obstacle to suspend that tradition of evaluating film. In fact, what you get from it is this added artifice to the dreamlike rhythm of a giallo, and a heightened visual world of faces that act as either windows or masks to the owner's true selves. Now, I've been picking up giallos here and there, but this unique style of horror is so craveable to me. I can almost always put one on, even those days where my motivation to watch something is just down in the dumps. So as the first cool winds of fall fell through the air upon me, I knew it was no better time than to go all out and dedicate a month to it. And thus, GIALLO FIGHT. I'm gonna pit each one against the next and let the victor move on, till we have our ultimate giallo champion.
Torso. 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 It saturates the screen with terror. Torso. Rated R.
We started with Torso, a 1973 giallo by Sergio Martino. The original Slumber Party Massacre was a very goofy, very Italian pulp murder film. I liked seeing this juxtaposition between the horror and the rich, gorgeous Italian setting. We have the slanted streets, the open square brimming with both pedestrians and cars, and this countryside villa. Also, in terms of the fashion, it seems we are dead center in the Scooby-Doo phase of the 70s. I loved a lot of the one-off side characters, these super quirky, super Italian extras. This movie is ridiculously Italian. But thematically, a lot of the dread is conveyed through this perspective of our women characters and the overbearing male gaze and chauvinism which never lets up on them. Granted, this is one of those films that's here to give you your cake before eating it too. I just wanted to shout at the camera to leave those poor girls alone. But I will say there is a midpoint twist, which is pretty surprising. It'll keep things spicy and the tension rising. The excellent cinematography absolutely carries this. I mean, shot to shot. This is just a case of zero plot or important characters to speak of, but more the aestheticism of giallo doing its thing with a commendable finesse. All in all, I found it a very solid slasher. Who Saw Her Die, the original Don't Look Now, was a bit of a redemption for director Aldo Lado. His other Italian horror ranked the lowest of those that I have watched so far. But here, not only is the movie great, but the direction in particular is a highlight. Like with Torso, I'm finding that these Italian films take a lot of charm from their culture's certain quality of life. It's that unhurried, moment-to-moment way of living, what I'll term for now a passeggiata. Now, if your sets and characters were dull, then that approach would suck, but this is giallo, and Who Saw Her Die is a Venice picture, so the aesthetics and Lado's passion for the subject are really firing off. In addition, the characters did feel more significant. The young daughter and main couple can conjure genuine concern when they're in danger. There's even a really good fake out. The little girl here will also turn out to be a staple of these films whenever they need a stock creepy girl child, by the name of Nicoletta Elmi. We'll go ahead and say this is the one where she gets to shine the most. It has some very sloppy sound editing, but bold and atmosphere building sound design. It's the last stretch of investigating that turned very tedious. Our main guy's like, alright, where's Fiorucci? Where's Carpaccio? Where's Cavatappi? And at some point I just don't even know where they are anymore, because they're just going to all these new locations and looking for somebody else. This could have been way shorter. But overall, with that first and third act, it's a thrilling, very atmospheric blend of all these horror tropes, from slashers to paranoia mysteries. Who Saw Her Die is moving on over Torso. Death Walks at Midnight by Luciano Ercoli. Whew. Man, I cannot even breathe. There is such incredibly thick misogyny in this one. This time of the gaslighting, a women be hysterical kind, as no one believes this lady, while belittling her and hitting on her at the same time. It's clearly critiquing this as a facet of Italian culture, so I'm not saying the film is horribly misogynist, but man, it's still frustrating a watch. The ultimate reason to see these, just lounging in vibes like this. God. Again, the investigation part just keeps going, sapping the life out of the movie. I mean, in my opinion, if you're making a giallo, the ideal length should be like 70 minutes. Maybe some more, even some less. I mean, the pulp paperbacks they get their name from are small little books, right? There's no need for this over-elaboration. But we've got the killer with the spiked glove, which is a cool as hell trademark murder weapon, and very strong villain elements. Like I said, with the sleazy misogyny, when the villains are truly revealed, it's heinous diabolical villainy. Giving this a 6 out of 10, leaving Who Saw Her Die with another W. But last word, why is it called that? This was a daytime giallo. I don't remember a single midnight that they could be referring to. Strip Nude for Your Killer, 1975. This is the sleaziest giallo I'll be watching this month, I pray. We're in soft porno now, and not a liberating kind. Truth be told, this is just poorly directed. I mean, there's a gluttony of stylish things strewn about thanks to being set in a modeling agency, but it's kind of still trashy and thrift story. It does not have the photographic chops of the rest, and scenes are so awkwardly shot and put together. It does a fantastic job making none of our characters likable, and wow, that ending was fucking horrible. It had a nothing reveal. Our main characters become even more despicable, but the film does not realize it. And yeah, you know, we're coming up to 1975, like the tail end of the big boom of quality giallo. And it already feels like we're at the VHS trash bin buck chasers. So now why is this one highlighted so much? I have to assume it's because of the title alone. I mean, that is the best thing about this movie. And in retrospect, it was my introduction to Edwige Fenech, who was the only person that I liked in this. For those who don't know, because I didn't, she's like the queen of giallo leading ladies. This movie didn't care about her as more than TNA though. So as for our ranking, it is time to say goodbye to Strip Nude for Your Killer.
What has been remains.
Remains!
In the Folds of the Flesh, 1970, Sergio Bergonzelli. So while this thing looks very scrappy, what might help it is that our killers are right out in the open from the start. We follow a family of total nutsoids as they hide their murder, which grows into murders. The course of the film is an imbecilic soap opera, and the most irresponsible therapy experiment ever, with a series of increasingly unwanted guests intruding into their home. I mean, it's a lark, it's a farce, way more than other jolly, in good ways and many bad. I found the resolution to also be hilariously stupid. Our detective walks away after presumably helping the one character who needed it, after destroying everything in their life, essentially. He's like, no need to thank me, enjoy your freedom and a happy life. And she's just left practically helpless and devastated. I mean, there are some good ideas in here, like the layerings of trauma, character full of artifice, and the castle as home setting. Oh yeah, it also takes a sharp turn into Nazi-sploitation. Very weird one. I'm gonna give it a low 5 out of 10. Will anything beat Who Saw Her Die? Don't Torture a Duckling. Lucio Fulci's 1972 giallo classic. Now this one is vicious. I mean, it's barely a giallo, but it has J and B in it, so I guess it tips over into the pro-giallo argument. You can really dive into the look of a Fulci film. It's this green-tinted, very Hollywoodized. You feel like you're in a grotto in his films. Even in this giallo, you're in the law of the jungle. You feel the heat, the humidity like hot breath, even the militaristic feel of his authority figures. The necrosis and putrefaction special effects are top-notch. This is definitely the zombie guy. And I don't mean to demean all the giallos in our collection, but this felt like it was being a real movie. It had talking points, full characters, and a plot. It brings you into the world of this isolated village, and all the twists and red herrings, boy are there so many red herrings, are actually thought out. There's a strangely sentimental core running through it. No, this was a really great installment in the genre. Also, it's pretty daring to center your film on explicit child murder. 8 out of 10, Don't Torture a Duckling wins, and earns a spot in my Giallo faves. Next we have What Have They Done to Your Daughters by Massimo Dallamano. Unfortunately, can't say we have the same redemption arc for old Massimo. He's the sensationalist director. There's the closeness to tabloid journalism, and the whole based on true events shtick, which is laid on thick in this one. This felt very milquetoast by all accounts, though. I felt like I was watching a TV movie, a slightly more melodramatic police operational. There isn't much hyper-stylized cinematography, save some good Steadicam bits. It's another subpar showing for the black-clad biker breed of killer as well. And the ending feels like they just stopped, adding to the insignificance of the story, which is actually the opposite of what they're going for. I can say I appreciate how Dallamano follows the giallo path of unmasking political or other power establishments as the real villains, I suppose. But this was just, 5 out of 10. Don't Torture a Duckling keeps the lead. So next we landed on another big boy, a deep red, Dario Argento's 1975 giallo staple. Nobody does it like Argento. He's seriously the king of giallo, in my opinion. We'll get into my favorite directors later, but this is very similar to Bird with the Crystal Plumage. A man is involved in a murder plot by stumbling upon it one night, and giallo ensues. This is simply Argento returning to this format, bigger and better. We can't not talk about the bangin' score by Goblin. Goblin creates the most appropriately intrusive, synthed out music. It can make you so amped you forget you're just watching a guy etch away plaster for 5 minutes. And there's some great characters in this, which is usually Argento's weakness. There's this lady, the best character in any of these. There is legitimate chemistry between her and the lead that make all their scenes a treat to watch. Speaking of the lead, it's David Hemmings from Blow Up, in a very similar role. I'm aware of you this time, David. You're not Terrence Stamp. You can tell Argento is really into shooting these films the way he does. When they get to the big psychedelic architecture house, you can see Argento breathing real heavy, just edging himself for all the shots he's going to get in the place. Now, it still ends with an incompleteness to it. I mean, what about his piano playing or the romance really carried through? It also accumulated its filler sequences, but considering it evens out despite being 2 hours long, that does prove just how much of the good stuff is contained inside. This might be controversial. If you compile a montage of highlights, Deep Red would look the clear winner. But as far as playing the movie from beginning to end, the journey I went on and the characters of Don't Torture a Duckling will stay with me a little longer. I'm going to keep Don't Torture a Duckling as my top pick. But then I watched All the Colors of the Dark, a film I had no expectations for, by Sergio Martino. And this one is awesome. From the opening scene, I was all in. We love an utterly bizarre nightmare sequence. This so feels like the 70s to me. It does something only really great films do and conjures its setting to life. The late autumn vibes are so succulent. The temperature of a Halloween story is just right. It's hitting all the senses. The story is a pseudo-fantasy giallo. It shared traits of Possession, Rosemary's Baby, even Antichrist. There's an underlying trauma that informs the odd actions giallo characters take. As half apartment horror, this location has the magic. This complex is brimming with personality. A discomforting, brutalist exterior that inside becomes a funky 70s core with interior odysseys of rogue halls and funky designs. And further adding to its 70s legitimacy, the satanic cult here is presented in a much more authentic way than I'm used to. It's a Telema-inspired sex cult, not just ooky spooky devil worship. And the way it mixes nightmares into reality, it manages to always be creepy with fantastic direction and use of score. There are ideas that point straight to some of David Lynch's famous tricks, but I won't spoil them. In the final act, I was so ready to be let down, when after a climactic showdown we get the boring police guy explaining everything to us, the whole mandatory, sobering justification scene. But to my excitement, the sequence ended, and it wasn't over yet. This feels entirely different from Torso, and it was made just 1 year before it. Who's this Sergio Martino guy? Starting to fall in love. So I'm giving this a strong 8 out of 10. It's our new best giallo. It might be the best giallo that I've seen so far. I loved it so much.
Beware the glare of the evil eye.
Then I watched Mario Bava's The Evil Eye.
The evil eye.
Considered by many the first giallo. Disclaimer though, I was warned that the version titled Evil Eye was a worse American cut of The Girl Who Knew Too Much. But Evil Eye was readily available, so I just watched it and...
Look deep into the evil eye and know the meaning of fear. Look, and you cannot look away.
I can believe there might be a better version of this out there. So moving forward... genre horror tends to be around...
What does it want? What will satisfy its cravings? Only the dead know, and those they choose to tell.
Works that, though flawed, have highlights that get praised and passed down. With giallos and slashers, you have the famous kills. Here, it's like the highlights are moments where the style just amps up enough from the 50s studio noir to giallo levels. And that's about it. I mean, it's in black and white. That would be a cardinal sin for any giallo moving forward. It's actually very cheesy and comical at this stage. I mean, it's still for its time riffing on noir, so much that the tone goes for romance or the silliness of our protagonist, pointing out her penchant for pulp murder mysteries as a quirk. But I got nothing from the story or the characters. Letitia Roman is gorgeous, so there's that. But yeah, it's like we're crawling out from the old world of film. Bava is definitely coming most directly from Hitchcock and Hollywood Studio Pictures, but I wasn't too excited by this first turning point. And I mean, in terms of the filmmaking, it's fine, it's made well, but at the end of the day, I had to ask if I enjoyed my time spent in it. It felt 2.5 hours long, and I don't know how that's possible. It's 86 minutes. And that's ultimately why I'm giving Evil Eye a 4 out of 10. It ain't moving on.
Watch for it. The evil eye. It's watching you.
So I gave Bava a second chance with A Bay of Blood, all the way in 1971. And it's a good thing I did, because now this is the slasher starter. Dumb kids are introduced frolicking in their car on the way to camp. You can visualize the shot in your head already. Even the way of wasting time here is of a slasher-esque vibe, more than just like Italian giallo film time wasting. The kills, they're starting to feel different. They're brutal. They have that Voorhees lack of style, that bluntness. And the violence and gore effects are just left on the screen. Piling on, it's the late camp setting. You have the wacky bunch of characters. They're all introduced. They have one quirk. I like the off-putting medium lady who wanders around the woods in her cloak like she's Ozzy Osbourne. They got the entomologist with his strange habits. They even got the curmudgeonly fisherman living in his shack by the lake. And watching all of the reveals unfold in this one is a lot of fun. The carnage is at absurd levels. An alternate title for this was Carnage, and that's the exact word I used to describe it. It's entertaining all the way to the ending, which is memorably strange and unexpected, but also in a way that makes sense, especially with the tropes of slashers in mind. But I'd argue it works really at its best right here, as it fits with this commentary on excessive violence and corruption. This doesn't beat old Martino, but it is up there in my faves. I'm not a Bava hater, people. So, next we got my first Neo-Giallo that I'm tossing onto our marathon. Malignant, James Wan's 2021 horror film. It was much less Giallo than I was even expecting when putting it on this list. It did not have J and B, which is the least I would have asked for. But man, so much of this does not work. Like on paper, I could mention artifice a lot when talking Giallo, but while the sets and camera work and digital effects certainly come off artificial, it's the wrong kind. It's a slick, serious tone, clashing with the elements kept from the retro horrors. And the music is like Call of Duty Lobby, and some weird trailerized Pixies song. It didn't fit. The main actor, and really all the actors, gave me Madam Web vibes. It just comes off like a bad movie, even as a joke movie, which I do know the whole thing is like a joke. You can feel Juan laughing to himself the whole way through, but it's not really funny. Modern stuff has a seriousness to its look. The way they shoot digital, they up the contrast and lower the exposure to create this quote-unquote scary look, and it just feels drained of all the joys of horror. You know, even every little Neo-Giallo I see feels like such a cheap use of the tropes. They just acquire some colored gels and blast them. They make ladies up in heavy makeup and a wig, but they look like they're in a costume. You know, there's more to it than that. You should replicate some of the film techniques. They don't replicate the motion, the look, the feeling, the subtleties of what made these genres work with the film technology at the time. It oddly restrains itself so much while showing you that it was allowed to do any stupid thing it wanted. I mean, go crazy. Go bonkers. 5 out of 10. Okay, so next I jumped into another Sergio Martino because I'm liking this guy. The Strange Vice of Mrs. Wardh. I really love Sergio's blend of Giallo. It keeps the D-movie sleaze, but elevates it with fantastic surreal set design, high fashion, and genuinely interesting characters. His sets are the kind that are triggering memories of like horror video games. How many took the importance of placing you in an uncomfortable, strange version of familiar environments to set their spell. I even compare it to Gene Rollins' gothic, spooky, elevated genre films with complex women. Although she does do the thing where she faints on cue, like she's a Tennessee fainting goat. She being, once again, Edwige Fenech, the Queen. And in these films, she gets to harness that title. She's got the iconic look, this glazed, impenetrable expression, the eyeliner and lashes. It's gorgeous. Going back to aesthetics, look at this. Is this Star Wars? The theme of the story is strange vice, and that permeates inside and out. It makes scenes so much more interesting. You can connect the dots and interactions between characters. The sleazebag men that our heroine loves serve as suspects because of her attraction to them, and it acts as this standout example of meta-commentary in these giallos, on the audience's attraction to these sleazy films. The kills could be more special though. That big part of giallo is kinda perfunctory slicing with the razor blade. Ooh, this was a really hard pick between all the colors of the dark. That one was way more my thing, but this was even better directed and full of sharp dialogue. To be over it, Strange Vice has to be like 8.99, so take the numerical rating with a grain of salt, but this is our new top pick. Okay, the Red Queen kills 7 times. The fuck? This is the exact same set from Strange Vice. I loved the gothic murder mystery vibes. We followed descendants of a centuries-old castle and the curse that comes with it. The plot is actually like the same as Strip Nude, with the murders all connecting to this circle in a fashion photography house. But this is like how it should be.
Stanotte hanno assassinato mia moglie.
Yes, Queen! Slay! Slay!
As for its central story, it's full of childhood trauma reverberating dreamlike into the present, and the familial drama taken to gruesome torture dungeon lengths. This is the very solid version of all the worst giallos on this list, and features the best hard cut to nudity we have seen so far. I mean, it's a strong contender, but I think it's just barely under for the ending and losing its tightness in the home stretch. 7 out of 10 for 7 times. A Lizard in a Woman's Skin returns to Lucio Fulci, who's making his Sergio Martino film, apparently, and honestly does a great job. We're continuing on the freaky 70s style of terror paranoia. We've got the commenting on the attraction-repulsion complex within the character and the audience. We've got the crazy dream sequences, absolutely the highlight. Save one chase scene in the biggest abandoned building ever built by man. And they're in Britain in this one, and yet they still find all of these insane dreamlike locations. You're used to this just being an Italian thing, you know? I gotta give the caveat, it's got lots and lots of investigating with the detectives. That dryness that comes to hurt yet another strong giallo. Now this actress is also top tier of the giallo ladies. She might be the most memorable character in Don't Torture a Duckling, and a lot of her presence comes less from her having a look than her acting chops. She's a really great main character.
Ass Queen, Skinny Legend, Versace boots the house down. Slay Queen, Hunty Mama, and Oop Daddy work. Charlie XCX, snatch my wing.
I didn't even mention this has the most legitimately disturbing image in any giallo. And it's not even related to the murder. And nobody addresses it. But whoever's behind the image we see, that's our priority now. Forget this slasher, we gotta find that psycho. And I do believe this one did not have any J&B in it. Fail. Strange Vice is still our champion. Okay, next I watched a really interesting one, The House with the Laughing Windows by Pupi Avati, who, laugh all you want, wins the title of making the scariest giallo. Now, one of the first words I used for this movie was snuff-esque, and as it turns out, that is absolutely the vibe. With a concept that is so genius and one I've never thought of, it's insinuated that we're stumbling upon not a snuff filmmaker, but a snuff painter. And it really draws out the creepiness of this and of the artistic eye being trained into pure evil and torture. The synthy score and crunchy sound design are all adding to this feeling like one of those cursed, uncanny analog horrors. And what's funny is this copy I watched has actually got to be the highest quality, like better than the streaming that I've been doing. Yet you can just feel the VHS distortion and detuning that this film would have been exclusively available on. Just making it unsettling in your mind. There's a subconscious terror to the whole affair. Like there's an inevitability to your grisly demise. As you see the paintings and first stumble upon the titular house, you feel like you're destined to be one of its victims. This one's also set in a remote, unfamiliar village, and it's concentrated with that unease. The colors and close-ups of strange faces imbue everything with an untrustworthiness, and with like the first stages of decay. It's a great job making you paranoid that the whole town is somehow complicit, which means you're really doomed. What's weird is Salo popped into my head at some point, but I didn't think much of it. That's too much of a stretch. Until I looked information up and Mr. Pupi Avati helped write Salo. That's a hell of a mark towards his talent, but it does show where his mind is at. It's a very different place than the normal giallo. But god damn it, not you too. It drags in the middle, and it's pushing a romance that's dead in the water. It isn't beating Mrs. Wardh, but it's an essential and a new favorite. Here's a place I might as well bring up that I'm convinced David Lynch loved giallos, but it's established that he's built off noir. But I don't hear enough critics talk about giallo, which I'm seeing just as much if not more a reference point. Giallo is a genre sprung from noir, but a movement that started adding surrealism and nightmare logic to it, which typifies Lynch to a T. Even as I went down the rest of this marathon, I kept finding things that, Lynch must have seen and been inspired by, which we'll get to. But first, Neo Giallo attempt number 2. The Strange Color of Your Body's Tears by Helen Catet and Bruno Forzani. Oh my god, guys. Where do we start? You know, French weirdness is different than Italian weirdness. It's just a different beast. So Giallo's weirdness being faithfully adapted within this weirdness, there's a dissonance, but I don't mind that. I mean, an old genre can be bent and distorted from the lens of a time outside it. Better to be something new rather than just a carbon copy, right? So when I started this movie and was taking notes, I wrote, legitimately the most obsessively accurate reanimation of the genre by a modern film. This is clearly full of love for prime Giallo. That's what I thought, until it won't stop ruining its own scenes. Like, please move the camera back, show us something. Okay, maybe calm down a little, stand still for a second. You hyperactive fuck, I don't get all the cuts. Which collaged into a parody of film school pretentiousness. And a lot of their ideas are basic as fuck. Like red, green, and blue colors standing out. Turning the frame sideways, extreme close-ups on eyes. What's happening isn't inventive or hard to follow, it's just your unnecessary jumbling around that grows obnoxious and honestly feels like you grew bored with your project, so now you're just doing this and a little of this. And that too, like Bergman, like Lars von Trier, I'm such an artist. It's also not very well acted. The main lead's face is so uninviting and kind of obnoxious, like why would you choose this? By the end, my goodwill has fallen so far, I feel like it's a scam film, where if you took any scene and showcased it to somebody, it'd be like, wow, this looks amazing. I can't wait to see it, here's my money. And then you watch the whole thing, and it's just a bunch of those cool scenes over and over, and literally nothing else except nonsense. It's like a cloying sweetness, the candy that just makes you sick as you keep eating it. There were so many groan-worthy moments, the Lost Highway rips, the Dream Logic 101, and through all the key jingling, if you analyze the actual scenarios that must be written down on a script somewhere, they're laughably stupid. I mean, I was tapped out. What investment or fear am I supposed to feel when there's no substance, no establishment of anything? You have to be tripping balls to get anything profound out of this. Give me Panos Cosmatos over this any day. Alright, final word. I think its cardinal sin is that if you asked a newcomer who completed this if they were ready to dive into the world of Giallo, their response would probably be, no thanks. Next, I turned things right around with The Laughing Woman, a 1969 film by Piero Schivazappa. I mean, what is this set? Look at what's going on here. This is like beyond Giallo into an absurdist fantasy world. Forget increasingly surreal set design. We're in space. We're in the Jetsons. So this is mainly about a woman being taken prisoner by a maniac. And the maniac's motivation is as over-the-top as the James Bond world we're in, but it's also realistic because it's incel core pseudoscience. I mean, our man is a nut obsessed with male fertility and replacement theory. I could picture his monologue being delivered today. It's so fittingly campy in a way that can still contain real terror. Its characterization of powerful male narcissistic ego is spot on, and you descend into this bizarre lair / compound of his creation, dripping with the pride of its curated museum piece elements and engineering. It's not just wacky, it's well designed. It goes so incomprehensible and over the top that it characterizes the megalomaniac who built it. But the key is that his regular plan of using a prostitute fell through, so now the lady in his cage is an empowered woman, the kind he most detests and who will be a wrench in this little game of his.
Gil? Yes. Yes, Queen Skinny Legend. Versace boots the house down. Slay Queen Hunty Mama and I oop. Daddy work Charlie XCX snatch my weave. Millie Bobby Brown has your IP address.
And the power struggle loops and loops deliriously. The first half of this movie throws you into extreme misogyny, and the exploitation film style of everything I assume has led many people to see it as surface-level softcore. It feels edgelord and disturbing, it's full of sexual and violent content, but it does manage to do so without actually using gratuitous gore or sex. It's art exploitation, and it pays off. The other side of the film gives us an equally extreme feminist sci-fi nightmare about the battle of the sexes rearing its dormant head in full force in the advent of in vitro repopulation. There's an intelligent layering of the psychologies and a backdrop of all the higher powers at play that reward you if you're paying attention. The score is also fantastic 60s, 70s goodness and helps prove its intent in how it plays with the tone. If you doubt me, apparently this is from this movie. I was just looking up content about this and I saw that thumbnail that YouTube has recommended to me 1 million times. I would not think it's from a movie like this. You know, I was just waiting for it to falter at some point because this doesn't even have the following of a cult classic yet. I saw no fanfare for this, nothing telling me this would be the greatest thing ever, but the amazing, stunning, flabbergasting imagery just keeps coming. The story twisting in strange, exciting directions non-stop. I had to sort of rewatch the movie, skimming through it, and it's like a whole new experience. You realize how solid it is, that all the details were there from the start, all the meticulously crafted shots, the edits, the music cues, even the acting. My Jetsons comparison wasn't even nonsense. You could also throw in subversive sci-fi to this. It's that family of out there satires, think Jodorowsky, Makavejev, but it predates them. This is from 1969. It's a living, breathing specimen of that unique era. I just brought up Panos Cosmatos earlier, and this is literally as insane as his Fever Dream homage is. I think this was a big reference point for Beyond the Black Rainbow. It does beg the question of if this is a giallo. It's really pseudo-giallo, but it's got the J&B, it's got the absurd amount of twists at the end, and I would consider it giallo enough. 9 out of 10. Legitimate, strong 9 out of 10 even. It's gonna be pretty hard for this not to be our winner. So please, if you're gonna go see a movie, watch this. Make this a cult classic, damn it. So what the hell do you follow that up with but a Dario Argento joint? So I picked Phenomena, and yeah, this just throws in the whole 80s. A jambalaya of all the trends that the 80s had a weird obsession with. Psychic phenomena, putting monkeys in things, and electric instruments. It's garish, it's a popcorn giallo, and I love that. Okay, I don't know about the inclusion of Iron Maiden and Motorhead and Andy Sex Game. The vibes are a bit off from the Goblin Rock scores. We got Donald Pleasance in this with a Scottish accent?
The phone. Very particular wind. Typical of this part of the country. It comes from the Alps. The blasts of warm air cause snow avalanches. Make the flowers grow. The hatching of the larvae.
Sure, why not? This definitely captures that perspective of a child Dario Argento fantasy horror. There's so much loose imagination and ideas, all leading to this final act that is as insane and grotesque as it needed to be. I left very satisfied by all the payoffs. Okay, Jennifer Connelly, gorgeous. Donald Pleasance, gorgeous. Tonga the Ape, well, I can't say gorgeous because I couldn't look at the screen when that butt was out. Jesus, that thing was obscene. The flaws also spring from all the Argento fairy tale, 80s phantasmagoria horror, and slasher approaches bursting holes through this overstuffed homunculus of a creation. But I can't not say that that is also what makes the thing so damn special. Very solid 8 out of 10. Alright, we're coming to our last chunk of giallos, so I threw on another Sergio Martino, Case of the Scorpion's Tail. Wait, they had somebody fall from a roof and they didn't turn into a ragdoll? What is this? Giallo, I think not. The plot elements here felt rushed, like they're supposed to happen, so they do. When the killings begin in greater detail, it does ramp up though. The story's full of twists, up to entire narrative twists. It's a more basic foray, but Martino still has the sauce. So, solid movie. It's just that if you've seen all the giallos, this one's like template. It's still got those strange 70s touches. The all-fur love nest, the paprika. Why do their police sirens sound like Pac-Man? We're gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Then I watched StageFright by Michele Soavi. We're all the way in 87 at this point. Every time I think these can't get goofier, the next one proves me wrong. That opening sequence is a 10 out of 10. I'm wondering if there's a bit of climax taken from this. And it's time to just admit it. At this point, we've reached the very edge of Giallo's existence, to the realm where only slashers live, and it feels it. The production style and trademark quirkiness belies its Giallo DNA, but if you put this on at a slasher marathon, you'd get enough of the new vibe that it feels at home. The main plot is basically just everybody trapped in this theater with a killer gets slashed one by one. It's really the beginning and the ending that gets to get weird, in a kind of made up as it goes along way. This guy Willie shows up and he's great. We should all be like Willie. It was a fun, weird offshoot, just doing its thing, regardless of whether it's under the name StageFright or Aquarius or my personal favorite Bloody Bird. Somewhere between a 6 and a 7. Next we got the most similar film, Opera by Dario Argento. This is a late 1987 giallo centered around an opera theater. Argento's music choice has been getting more and more random. It is just totally random at this point. There's one needle drop I can't spoil, you just have to see it for yourself. You have the histrionic dramatics of opera, but the setting is more grounded than his usual fantasy-tinged ones. I mean, the kills here feel violent and nasty. In most giallos, the killer is labeled a sex maniac by the press or the police, and it comes off as an exaggeration. In opera, the killer truly feels like that deranged sex maniac they kept talking about. But that leads into the film not working, because this is a dumb script. Not silly, goofy, just straight up dumb. So without the excuse of the world not feeling real, the way people act is even more preposterous and irresponsible. The characters aren't much fleshed out, even for an Argento film. The ravens are given more attention. It's very solid with the vibes, the increase in camera movements Argento is playing with, and the opera setting and music elevated, but nothing as high up as his earlier work. 6. Then I watched The Perfume of the Lady in Black, a Francesco Barilli film from '74. Now this one's weird. I'd call it pseudo-giallo. You won't get the disguised killer or the investigating, but it's one where those divergences lead to exciting changes. For example, knowing the whole story, it's odd that from the start our protagonist isn't some outsider who just arrived in town or in their apartment. She was just there, as far as we know, which makes the way we descend into a conspiracy feel even odder, more unexplainable. Now, if you want that giallo style, this is a very pretty movie. The colors are popping, shot after shot. I just wish it established anything at the start so we could go down this path with a sense of direction. Because to me it felt hollow with this one character we don't know anything about, doing things for no reason I can identify. This is very Polanski. It's an apartment complex horror. The community of people around her are all suspicious, like every last one of them. But okay, let's just talk about what happened after this ended. Wow, I need to rewatch this, like soon, because this might be really, really good. After the days of the first act where I didn't have anything that I cared about, the creepiness kept rising to a point where I got into it, and it just kept getting darker and creepier until that ending. The ending is actually insane, both if you're taking it literal or as a continuation of metaphorical trauma ghost story taking over the film. My score shot way up by the end, so yeah, I need to give this a second chance because this might be genius. This is the film that I am seriously going to draw a connection to Mulholland Drive with. I'd argue you can picture just transposing this story to Hollywood. The main actress even looks remarkably like Naomi Watts in that movie. So yeah, go into this with higher expectations than me. Think of it as a mindfuck film and just enjoy the ride. It doesn't have a winning rating on my first watch, but we'll see in the future. So our last film was The Fifth Chord, a Luigi Bazzoni film. Now this time we got a man being ogled by the camera, our sexpot Franco Nero.
You're a lying little whore.
Whose charm is definitely heightened by his role as a reporter/detective. If I got any Disco Elysium boys in my audience, he's exactly what I imagine that young Harry Dubois they talk about would be like. Just full of red flag charisma. He should stay away, but he's got those damn blue eyes. When I saw the name Franco Nero, I thought he was a genre staple, just not in the lead, but the only credit I saw shared was Querelle. Definitely remember him from that movie. This also has an amazing opening sequence. It opens at a New Year's party, as 70s gaudy as films like Seconds or Clockwork Orange. It's such a good sequence. It's the bedrock of the plot, which splits between all of these characters that we learned about from their wordless interactions that night. So when murders start connecting them, we have no idea what that connection is, but we're intrigued by that mystery. I'm just gonna say it straight up, this is one of the most superbly shot films ever, sequence after sequence. You wanna know the real magic trick here? This is a heavy investigative giallo, but it's as interesting as the non-investigative parts of the others. Franco Nero is a great lead, and it even makes the investigations feel as camp as normal giallo plot. Can you turn the Orb of Confusion off while we're talking? Listen, I know that saying it's shot great is like a free space when complimenting these movies, but Fifth Chord is like so ridiculously good. It doesn't just carry its weaker parts, but overpowers most everything. At its core, the story and the reveal weren't anything remarkable. The way the aesthetics merge with them makes it feel more like an unforgettable tale, even if you don't know why. 8 out of 10. So yeah, that leaves our number 1 spot going to The Laughing Woman. Though if you want our winner to be more overtly giallo, give it to the runners-up All the Colors of the Dark and The Strange Vice of Mrs. Wardh, both Sergio Martino, who wins the award for personal favorite giallo director. I say Argento's the king. He represents the genre. Sergio Martino produced the highest caliber movies overall for me. I'm so glad I discovered him. He's like the 4th one, if you're ranking a Mount Rushmore of giallo directors, but usually places just mention top 3, and he's like the one left out. Give the man more credit, man. He's top tier. Even Torso I find myself to have underrated over the month. It stuck with me more than the films it's placed with. Looks like I'm going to be watching all of his works, such as L'Allenatore nel Pallone 2.
Per il ciclo a qualcuno piace calte.
Madonna benedetta dell'incoronata di top!
With that, we are closing out our month packed with giallos. Listen, if you think I've been talking about a lot of movies, I actually had to cut this month short. I kinda want to do another giallo month at some point. This genre's just got something special. It is so much fun. I never even got bored. There were so many iterations and flavors of giallo that I discovered. Giallos are maybe even better around October. So really, if you're out of ideas what to watch this month, throw on a giallo. It's guaranteed to give you something to remember.
Torso.